Did you know that Harley-Davidson made a smartphone? Yep, that big bad motorcycle company actually did it. And you know what? They made some pretty interesting choices. Faux leather textured back, massive metallic logo, a giant presentation case, and the most biker of all operating systems, Windows Phone 8.1. Oof, that is punk rock. But do you know which other big brands tried their luck at making smartphones? And were any of them actually any good? In this video, we're looking at 7 big brands that tried releasing smartphones and why most of them failed. You think you can name all of them? I fucking doubt it. There's some weird ones in here. All right, number 2. Amazon. The year is 2010. Apple has just released the iPhone 4, and the people in the Jeff Bezos empire start development of what they believe a great smartphone should be. And why not? The huge success of their Kindle e-readers is probably what gave them the confidence to try and expand their tech ecosystem. They actually worked on 2 models. One was codenamed Otis, which was cheap, and Duke, which was more of a flagship model. But they eventually stopped working altogether on the cheaper model and doubled down on their premium offering, which ended up being released as the Fire Phone. And of course, any new entry into the competitive smartphone space needs a unique feature or two, right? So Amazon came up with what they called dynamic perspective. Ooh, that sounds good. This was all about giving users tilting gestures and on-screen 3D effects, but that didn't come easy because they had to add 4 infrared cameras that tracked your head to the front of the phone, which looks kind of crazy. Was it actually useful? Well, people who write newspapers and magazines didn't think so, labeling it as a gimmick, and boy do we know all about that.
The glyphs were useful.
They were.
They're upset they're gone now.
You know what? You make glyphs and people don't like them, you take them away and they get upset. It's a very confusing world. But the big reason this phone was made was to be a portal to Amazon's online services. How exciting. It was built on a custom OS built on AOSP, but skipped on all of the beloved Google mobile services. So as a result, you got weird stuff like Silk Browser, Amazon's App Store, and Nokia here. What even the hell is that? Amazon wanted to create an ecosystem lock-in effect, even if it cost them a shed load of money to replace all of Google's apps. And yeah, you could sideload them, but that's a pretty tough ask for the average consumer. All in all, this was a strategic bet for Amazon. Were they able to actually establish independence in the smartphone sector? Well, no. Currently, this is the only Amazon-branded phone that's been released, and only 2 months after its launch, Amazon cut the price from $199 on contract to 99 cents on contract, so yikes. And to top it all off, in October 2014, Amazon reported a $170 million write-off for the project, including $83 million in devices that had just sat unsold. Mental. I think that tells us everything we need to know about that launch, so on to number 3. Marshall. Marshall has had success with Bluetooth speakers, wireless earbuds, and over-ear headphones, but did you know that they also tried making a smartphone back in 2015? So what was it called? Well, they called it just London, and attempted to target musicians and music lovers with a few quirky audio features like 2 headphone jacks at the top with independent volume control, dual front-facing speakers, a dedicated M button for instantly accessing the music player, a system-wide equalizer, and my favourite bit probably has to be this giant brass wheel they put on the side for volume control. It takes up so much space inside the phone, and I fucking love it. Oh, that's so stupid. Oh, stupid things on phones just make them better, don't they? That's what this video is all about. There's plenty of stupid shit, and this is great. So it's all those brands, including us, that say adding a audio jack takes up too much room. Well, these put 2 in and a giant volume wheel, so you do the math on that. And with Marshall having such iconic branding, a big prominent logo was added on both sides, along with a faux leather effect on that removable back. Beneath was a replaceable battery displaying a wonderfully on-brand message and a Union Jack proudly printed underneath. But should that have been a Swedish flag? It's worth noting that a few of the phones in this video were not actually made by the brands themselves. Some of them were either licensed products or made in collaboration with an established smartphone maker or ODM. For example, the Harley-Davidson phone from the intro was actually made by NGM, which is an Italian company, and a couple of the phones we'll be discussing in this video were made by Bullet Group, a UK-based company that specialised in making rugged and durable products. More on them later. The amount of input the actual brands had on the phone varies, but you can imagine that if it had their logo on it, they probably had at least some degree of input. As we've mentioned in many of our videos, the R&D and manufacturing of a smartphone is incredibly expensive. It easily goes into millions of dollars, so it's no wonder that some of these brands sought to leverage the experience of others before dipping their toes into the world of smartphones. It's a bit hot. Anyway, back to the Marshall London. This product was actually licensed by a Swedish company called Sound Industries, and ironically, this was actually the first and last phone this company made. This partnership allowed Marshall to safely experiment with its brand in the smartphone market without risking any of its own millions. Smart. So what actually happened with the phone? Well, bluntly, poor sales resulted in a financial loss for Sound, who didn't make anywhere near the amount of money they wanted to, and there's a few reasons why that might have been. Firstly, the price. They charged a premium for a phone that actually had an entry-level processor at the time, and those advanced audio features were probably not compelling enough for the average user to justify spending money on. So Marshall's audio legacy makes selling headphones and speakers make sense, but why would anyone believe that a guitar amp company could create a decent smartphone experience? It was just too much of a stretch. So, just like Amazon, a V2 Marshall phone never came to be. Sound Industries later merged with Marshall Amplification in 2023, resulting in a brand that we know today, Marshall Group. It's definitely not the weirdest brand that's made a phone, so stay tuned for number 7. We have metrics to meet. Please continue watching until number 7, the yellow one. I do actually kind of like this phone though. This is probably my favourite on the list. So yeah, if I was a collector, I'd probably pick one up. I'm not though. Moving on. Kodak. Kodak is best known for making film and cameras, right? Well, would you believe that there have actually been a whole bunch of Kodak branded smartphones over the years? And yeah, spoiler alert, they weren't very good. Back in 2015, the Kodak IM5 hit the market and did not perform very well at all. It was very basic, lacked RAM, having just 1 gig in 2015, and had an unusually simple UI. Just look at the size of those fucking icons. Something that made reviewers claim that it was great for elderly people and non-techies. After that came a couple of short-lived devices with very little coverage, the SP4 and IM7, sandwiched around the best-known model, the Ektra, which arrived in late 2016. This one was named in homage to Kodak's iconic 1941 Ektra rangefinder, so you'd think that it would be something special, and once again, it really wasn't. They marketed the Ektra as having a next-level camera with a dedicated shutter button and a lump that acted as some sort of camera grip. And my goodness, look at how tiny that little camera lens is inside the camera bump. How things have changed. It also shipped with a pre-installed Super 8 app, which simulated well-known film stocks for photos and videos, allowing users to develop their photos in a virtual darkroom. How fun. All of these Kodak devices were actually built by Bullet Group, who I mentioned earlier, a British company whose expertise is building phones under license for other brands. They mostly made rugged phones, so these ones are a bit of an oddity. The Ektra sold pretty poorly, but just like Marshall, Kodak walked away unscathed whilst Bullet bit the bullet of the flop. This is why the licensing model is so popular with heritage brands doing phones. There's basically zero downside if the phone bombs once it hits the market, apart from being just a little bit embarrassing. All right, on to number 5. Who drew this one? After many great years making tracksuits and trainers, what do? That's right, you try and make it a smartphone. Puma attempted to release a phone called the Phone M1, and it was developed under license by Sage & Wireless in 2010. They claimed in marketing that this phone was not like all those other phones, and my God, were they right. It was shit. The big USP was that it had an integrated solar cell on the rear to charge its 880 mAh battery. Some other interesting notes about the software: it didn't run Android. Instead, there's a custom OS from Sagem, and boy, did they ever sprinkle in some personality. There was a built-in virtual cougar named Dylan, described as being cheeky and cool. And there's a sarcastic calculator that would sometimes drop sarcasm rather than the actual answer you were looking for, which is helpful. Outside of that, there are of course some sporty apps to make it align with Puma's core business, but like many of the phones in this video, it was a commercial flopper. Apparently it was just too expensive, didn't have Wi-Fi, and had a resistive touchscreen despite other companies deploying capacitive screens around this time. Yikes. But weirdly enough, the coolest thing about this phone was probably the packaging. It won some prestigious design awards and kind of reminds me of the early days of CMF packaging. Give us a comment down below if you want us to bring that back, and we won't, but it'll just be for me. So how did the launch go? Well, after entering production, it was released in Europe via operators and Puma stores for around €399, but Puma and Sagem actually decided to cancel the expansion into other markets due to low sales. There was no widespread international release because the quirky features and software wasn't enough to sell people into the terribly outdated specs for the time. On to number 6. Red Digital. If you know anything about video production, you'll have heard of Red. They make big, expensive cinema-grade cameras used to shoot things like Guardians of the Galaxy and The Hobbit, and a whole bunch of MKBHD's videos. When Red started teasing the Hydrogen One in 2017, the hype and expectation were pretty high, because after all, at its core, Red was a premium tech company, and because of that, everyone knew that this phone was going to be pretty expensive, whether it was good or not. So why did Red even try diversifying into smartphones? Well, this product was to be the first building block of a new customizable ecosystem that had a vision of users buying add-on modules like better camera sensors and lenses and other accessories to transform their phone into a portable cinema system. Just like Marshall had targeted audio fans, this thing was primarily designed for filmmakers and content creators. Features that shipped in 2018 included a revolutionary holographic display that could show 3D images without glasses, dual front-facing speakers, a dedicated capture and record button, and a pogo pin system for those promised mods. So, how did that land? Well, in reality, it was kind of disappointing because the holographic screen looked blurry and didn't have as much brightness as was desirable for people like Mr. Marquez. He was upset about that.
The Hydrogen One screen just does not get very bright.
Apparently made some people feel really dizzy, including Joe Rogan.
Whoa. Dude, this is weird.
Ironically, the built-in camera was an off-the-shelf system, meaning it was comparatively worse out of the box than iPhones released that year. And that modular lens and accessory system that they promised, well, it was perpetually delayed and then never really made its way into customers' hands. So, Who is to blame for this show? Well, unlike the comparatively harmonious relationship between Marshall and Sound, Red decided to blame the ODM for the device's shortcomings. One of Red's founders is on record saying that they significantly underperformed. Despite Red teasing that the Hydrogen 2 was in development and it would be created with a better partner, it was cancelled in October 2019 when Jim Jannard, the then CEO, retired, shutting down the Hydrogen project altogether. All right, we finally made it to our 7th and final brand, but before we reveal it, what have we learned so far? Well, here at Nothing, on more than one occasion, we've lent into our underdog status, and that's because we're pretty bloody proud of how far we've come in the smartphone world. The examples in this video are just a handful of case studies of how brutal this market is. So, even if you're an established brand with all the resources in the world, no amount of innovation or cool design are going to guarantee you success. So, to anyone, especially the people in this video who take on the smartphone market, whether with help or not, we salute you. All right, brand number 7. Can you guess what it is? Here's a hint. It's a car brand. Land Rover. So we've actually seen the release of 4 Land Rover branded phones, 2 feature phones, and 2 proper smartphones. They kick off the journey with the Land Rover S1, and its main feature is that it's rugged. What a surprise. Licensed and made by Sonim and released in 2009, this was a GSM handset with a good IP rating and not a lot else. Oh, and the S2? That was equally uninteresting. Fast forward 9 years, and guess who's back? That's right, it's Bulletproof. Wow, the hero of this video, who have licensed the Land Rover Explorer. Features of note included an automotive look and a magnetic modular system on the back similar to that of Motomods. And what you could get with that was the Adventure Pack, where the phone shipped with a magnetic snap-on module to provide extra battery and an additional GPS module. Kind of cool, but kind of chunky. And finally, Land Rover phone number 4 was called the Explorer R. Rather than being an upgrade over the previous model, this one ditched the cool magnetic modules, removed the car grill inspired design, and released with some pretty basic specs. Sure, it was still durable, but the attempt at being unique was just gone. What a disappointment. So did any of these phones actually sell in any meaningful volume? Well, the truth is, we don't really know, but all signs point to the answer. Not really. They were really just lifestyle products and not super designed for the mass market, so despite having durability credentials on paper, who really needed that? And the Explorer R wasn't just the end of the Land Rover series of phones, it was also one of the final chapters of its manufacturer, Bullet Group. They tried to pivot to satellite messaging phones in 2023, but it wasn't enough. So in early 2024, the company behind Cat, Land Rover, Motorola, and Kodak phones officially went bankrupt after a failed restructure. And I think that's kind of sad.
I declare bankruptcy!